Um, I have my whole agenda typed out here over on my other screen. The first thing I said was welcome. I think we did that. NAR settlement, we'll come back to that in a second. And then here's a huge disclaimer, and I have this in caps on my screen. I'm giving you too much information today. Okay? So please don't tell me, Matt, you're going too fast. This is my disclosure up front. I'm going to give you way too much information up front today, but I need you to just parse it through your head, try and get the big picture, and come back and just pick the one or two things that work for you, right? The intention today is not for you to digest all of this and utilize all of this. See it in totality. The good news is you can come back to this video and then pick the pieces that work in your business. Fair enough? Did I make that disclosure strong enough? Don't feel like you are being blitzed, but it's by design so you can get the big picture and then figure out the things that you need. All right, real quickly on the NAR settlement. First of all, there is no new news. It just kind of humming along the way it does, but I'm just kind of curious in your practice, have you really seen any change? I mean, honestly, have you seen any change? None?
Sorry, I was doing something else. What did you say,
Not
Matt?
yet. I've
Well,
seen
the
it yet.
question is in regards to, well, good point, Haley, because it doesn't become official until July, if it becomes official. But what, if any, impact have you seen from the proposed NAR settlement in the way you're doing your business?
Nothing.
Nothing. Nothing. Yeah, Savannah, unmute.
Okay, so with working with different agents, I've noticed at least I've had two exclusive right to sells where Section 8 has been highly scrutinized or tried to be taken out. And I don't know if anyone else has seen that or if anyone's at least, with doing business with clients, had
Were they
clients
attorneys?
question that at all.
You were
One
That's-
one was a contracts guy, but the other one wasn't. So I was just curious if anyone else has seen that,
and
or
what,
at least had anyone question it.
yeah. And so in case you don't like go through every day and look at the ERS, Section 8 is the section that talks about attorney's fees and class action lawsuits and yada, yada, yada. And whoever made the comment, was it attorneys who said that?
I did.
Oh, Scott. Yeah. So honestly, over my career as a principal broker for a lot of years, I would say 90% of the time, anybody who has a question with that is almost always an attorney or deals somewhere in contracts.
So they
And
want to be able to participate in a class action lawsuit.
Yeah, Matt, I've had people ask about it. It's easy to explain away at this stage. That
give it a quick shot, Daryl. What's the explaining away?
We talked over each other, so I'm not sure I heard that, but explaining away just means that you explain it the same way you always have, because they've heard things on the news, they've read things in the paper, things like that, and so some of them are curious, some of them thinking they're getting a discount. They don't know what it's all about.
Yeah.
So I think you have to be prepared to talk about it, and that's all.
I'm going to pop this up on my screen so everybody can see it. Just a second.
Matt, this is James. I would say it's been a phenomenal conversation starter.
Right? Free marketing.
I've had it seems like I've had a lot of calls, had a lot of people at events that I didn't that have, rather than me approach them, they've approached me and wanted to know how it affected things. I mean, I would say at this point it's been a huge benefit.
I love it, James. That's called the adult in the room mentality versus the sheeple. So I thank you for articulating that. So if you can see on my screen, this Section 8.
Wait, I need to ask James, how many of them asked for their check?
For their refund, is that what you mean?
Just kidding.
No, but well, that is actually a factor. I've had some very high-end clients that have brought up the fact that, they sold a $2 million house and paid some pretty substantial commissions. And they have asked going forward, what would that look like? And I don't think it's a negative. I think it helps. I think it's important for them to understand the landscape they'll be in. But I think that's a fair question, that they realize that they're wondering if in the future their commissions will be different, and it's a good opportunity to discuss different options.
So I think a good line for that one, especially of previous clients, because you'll get a few of them, you know, that come back and say, hey, you know, just like you said, James. But I think a great line, and it's a great line because it's based in the truth, is listen, the quote unquote new lawsuits came about in states like Missouri that didn't have well-defined agency, wasn't well disclosed what everybody was paying for. We've actually been ahead of the game in the state of Utah for decades. Our agency is well defined. Our commissions are explicitly outlined, so everybody knows what they're paying. There's no oops, you know, smoke and mirrors or shell game or anything like that. And so in Utah, it doesn't change a lot. I would just say this: commissions are always negotiable, right? That's a great line to always finish with. They're always negotiable. They always have been in the state of Utah. And just leave it at that. So, just real quickly, since Savannah brought this up, this section I have highlighted on my screen in kind of the blue is the section that most people have indigestion with. Haley, you made reference to the new section in green down below. And yeah, what are they going to do? Argue, no, I want to be part of a class action lawsuit? That's kind of a damper on the relationship. But the blue section says, if through no fault of the company, and that is the key line. When I have to deal with this with somebody, this is where I go to. If through no fault of the company, if we did nothing wrong, and then you as the seller do something that litigation arises out of, right? You agree to indemnify us, right? And the big conditional there is, if we did something that made us liable, then this section doesn't apply. But if we did nothing wrong, if nobody can point any fingers to anything we did wrong, then we shouldn't be sued because of something you do as the seller. Make sense? And so, yeah, you get attorneys, they I don't know, I think they word search for the word indemnification. And as soon as they see that, they throw a fit. So just be aware, that's just part of the lay of the land. Okay. Just finishing up the thought on the NAR settlement. This is I'm gonna cover kind of the buy side, the sell side in a couple of future Zoom calls. But the takeaway I wanted to have today was you should learn from this whole experience. There's a lot of talking heads in the world. They like to talk, especially when there's no definition, because they can just keep talking and they're not held to account because there's no data, no facts, and I think we've kind of beat this horse to death, but just don't participate. It's so much wasted energy until we know what we know. And even when we know what we know, it's for us in the state of Utah, it's not going to be much. So we'll see a few changes. We'll see some, you know, zero BACs, which we've had in the past on the MLS, and we'll have to negotiate. And we talked about the 3 different mechanisms we can use to accommodate for that, but it really doesn't move the needle. Okay. All right. So today, Haley, just give them a 20-second review of what you told me on the phone. What should we be covering today?
Today, the stats
Yes.
thing? Stats?
Stats, data, the
Yeah.
power, the literal power of data, right? And if you just come to people and lead with data, what's your success rate?
It's not high,
It's not high. There we
No.
go.
Unless they're
Ah.
analytical.
Say that
but
again.
it adds
Unless they're
cred.
really analytical.
Unless they're really analytical. But I would flip that coin and look at the other side and say, if we're going to make statements or try and be persuasive, how important is data?
Important. It
Yeah.
adds credibility to everything you say.
I use this example all the time. My wife is the quintessential amiable. And it's not that she doesn't have the capacity to be analytical, but it bores her to tears. Even she wants some data to back things up. Why are you saying that, Matt? Right? And I can't think of too many people that don't really love going into data as much as she doesn't love going into it. So for her to say things like that, I need some data to back this up, is pretty important. So that's the goal today. So I put the main heading of this is the power of data. If we understand when to apply it, how to apply it, and to have the important pieces of data, not the minutia, then it really can be a huge tool in our toolbox. And so I'm hoping you come away today with a few things that will help you in harnessing that power in your own business, because my experience with most agents is they're not terribly good at it. They're not terribly good about it. I brought this up in sales meeting. Why do people predominantly hire us as real estate agents? What's their prime motivator? Come on, participation sport. Stockton.
Success.
Say that again, Parker.
Success.
That's they want to be successful. Okay.
They're afraid.
They're afraid. They're afraid. They have fear of the transaction. It is probably the largest transaction that they ever have or will have. And it's so ironic because we live in the information era where they have so much information at the ready. But they just don't know how to harness all of that data. It becomes overwhelming to where they actually get more frustrated. And that's why since the beginnings of the internet, the number of people using realtors has actually gone up, not gone down. So
Matt, the flip side of that is trust.
yeah. I mean, they kind of go hand in hand, right? I want to be able to trust you, James, that you're going to take care of me, because honestly, I'm not sure how to navigate this. And you should have the data. You're the professional, right? And I want you to be able to show me, not just I'm going to put a spin on yours, James. It's a Ronald Reaganism, remember, with Gorbachev, trust but verify, right? Yeah, of course I trust Gorbachev, but we're going to verify as well. And I think the verify is where the data comes in. Okay, so I've got a lot of things to cover today. As you can see on my screen here, I have like a bazillion windows open. I'm going to start with this one. Okay, so if you're in the MLS, and Kyle, I know a lot of people down in St. George have dual MLS access, but even on Flex, there's roughly the equivalent of these. You just have to navigate and find, and maybe when I'm down at sales meeting, I'll show everybody down there where to find the same type of data. But every quarter, new data comes out, and I just did a round of sales meetings, so you've seen this, but this is the default view, right? Well, actually, I changed the county to Utah County, but you come up here on the left, and here are the things you can select. I want to see sold price. I want to see the actual number of homes sold and the number of homes listed, and I can do it by quarter. And oh, by the way, please, please, please always use median and not average. Okay. I'm going to toggle my screen here to one where I captured a bunch of stuff. I took that same data, and this is going to look really messy, but please pay attention. All I use is a simple program called Snagit. There's probably 30 different programs out there that will do a screenshot, and then you can draw boxes or lines and dash lines and arrows and annotate it. But remember, we're here looking at this data. I simply did a screenshot of this box. And over here in the red box, the blue line is per quarter, the median sales price. And if you look at that, it's predominantly flat for the last 6 quarters. Okay. And we're not going to go into every meaning of every data piece today because we only have an hour. But I think you can see why that would be beneficial for a seller who's trying to overshoot on pricing. Or, you know, this is a good time for the buyers before it starts to uptick again when rates get better, right? You have hit a flat spot. That's the best time for you to be buying. Okay. Now, the green lines are the number of homes listed, and I just took the last basically 4 years and averaged a line through it. You can see the trajectory. Obviously, what's happening with inventory? It's going down. It's gone down significantly, right? I mean, at the high point, you're at about 4,000, and currently the average we're sitting around 2,500. So inventory has not fixed itself. And there's always a fairly tight correlation between the amount of inventory and the number of sales. And sales has largely done the same thing. Okay? Everybody tracking that so far? Okay? This is not hard to do. I come in to statistics and I go to home sales graph and it puts me in this interface. That's it. I mean, that's like 2 clicks. Not hard to do. Do a screenshot, add a little meaning to it, and it becomes very helpful. So let me finish this one off. So I showed you what it was trending in the last 4 years, but if I go back, you know, the 5 to 6 years, or the first 3 to 4 years and put a line through, it's pretty stagnant. Same thing with solds, right? I used a little bit of a different dash so you could see it, right? Now that looks really messy, and for a lot of people, that will scare them away. But does this scare any of you looking at it? Or does it kind of make sense pretty quickly? This is what I've asked all of you to do since the beginning of the year. Put a calendar item appointment in your calendar at the beginning of every month and spend 1 to 2 hours with your favorite pieces of data so you get it in your head. So when somebody asks you, Haley, hey, how's the market doing? Just from this alone, what are some real quick hitters any of you would say for Haley? How's the market doing? Nobody? Come on. Scott, you're unmuted. Say something.
Well, the total, the median sold price is just hovering as normal, just
It's
average.
flat. It's stagnant.
flat.
Yeah, stagnant. Good word. Parker. Dan.
What was her name? Sorry, Dan. Who was? Sorry, I apologize, Matt.
Yeah.
What was her name that asked the question? You said if she asked the question?
Oh, just Haley on our call. So
Oh,
yeah.
Hey, Haley, that's a great question. You know, the market's actually doing great. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Right now, the market is actually standing relatively still over the past 6 quarters of business. What is really cool about that is the fact that listings are actually going down. So the chances that you get a little bit of a higher list price right now before prices get, you know, way crazy for buyers and now they have to compete for everything, but you get a buyer who's really solid and wants to purchase the property right now is really good.
Okay. Remember, in marketing, and especially when you're coupling data, it's never more important than to remember the acronym KISS, right? Keep it simple, stupid, right? And so careful not to give too much information. Scott, I liked yours. You know what? Pricing right now is pretty stagnant. For a buyer, that's good because you're not worrying about going out one weekend and seeing a price go up $10,000, $15,000 by the next weekend, right? So this is a good time. Or if it's listing inventory, right? Mr. and Mrs. Seller, this is a great time for you to be on the market because look what's happened to inventory in the last 6 quarters, right? Chances of you selling is actually pretty good. Dan, you had a comment?
Yeah, I mean, I've been asked this question several times, and the answer, as far as, you know, how's the market, is, you know, depends on whose perspective. I think from a seller's perspective, it's good, it's healthy, because we have a ton of headwinds, and with those headwinds, you'd think that prices would be going down, but they haven't. In the last 6 quarters, they've stayed relatively stagnant, even though there's been less sales in the marketplace. So I think that means we found a floor, and I think that, you know, as soon as we get some tailwinds, that we're going to see those prices increase.
Right.
So
how does this apply to your needs, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, Mr. or Mrs. Seller?
Right. So if you're eventually buying, I think now's a great time to buy, because I think prices are just going to be more in the future. If you have only one transaction and that's to sell, you know, like maybe we wait a little bit, but I think that's what the data's telling me.
Yeah, listen, don't overthink this. You can. I could even take just the one green dash line versus the other one. You know, in the past 4 years, you know, and there's a little bit of an overlap. We were pretty stagnant on inventory. In the last 3 years, it's gone down significantly. I could use the same data for sold price, or not sold price, number of sales. Hey, Mr. and Ms. Seller, if you need to make it back to Tennessee in the next 3 months, let me just tell you what's going on with sales. They were steady for the, you know, from basically 2019 through, you know, 2022. But second half of 2022 through now, solds have actually dropped off a bit. So let's make sure we get your pricing right. See how simple that is? I didn't go into a ton of detail. I can show them the graphic. I can break out so it's not so confusing and just show them that. All right. Here's another thing. When you're in this graphic, you can go back a lot of years. I would suggest don't do it with all of these data points because it becomes really confusing really fast. But let me show you what you can do, which is kind of helpful. I said, show me only the sold price, and I want you to go back to Q1 2005. If you have, you know, the young couple or young person that's wanting to buy on their dad's going, oh, real estate's a terrible investment. I mean, I remember in 2008, and it took a huge hit. Yeah, here it is. So just so you know, in Q2 of 2007, we were at 224,000 median sales price. That was the high point. Q2 2007. By Q1 2012, that was the bottom, the trough after the correction. So anybody who's doing the math, that was a 50K drop, also known as 22.3% correction on pricing. 22.3% correction on pricing. Okay, now if you go up here to Q2 2022, we were at 545,000. We go to the bottom point, right, which is Q1 2023, 470. That's a $75,000 drop. That's 13.8% correction. And we have stabilized. Like you said, Dan, we've kind of hit a floor here. And as soon as rates improve, I think we're going to see us start tracking back up again. So again, kind of nerdy, I get it, but I can take this without being a nerd. I could show this to my wife, Nancy, and be like, show your buyers why real estate's a great investment. Yep, you're going to have periods where you do this, but I can go back, you know, 20, 50, 100 years, and the trend is always right here, right? It's always going up. It's always going up. Okay.
Hey, Matt, I got a question. You maybe
Yeah.
are going to cover it.
Yeah.
This is awesome for big picture, like you said,
Yes.
trends, all that. So just over the weekend, I had a situation where a guy was interested in a property in Spanish Fork. Nothing has sold in that neighborhood since April of 2022. That's kind of our high point on this.
Yeah.
Prices have not been stagnant, have not been flat. So how would be the best way to maybe kind of sort and search for reasonableness? So this unit now, the same unit, is $50,000 more than when they sold it in April of 2022. That to me, based on this, and it's too broad, perhaps I maybe need to go into Spanish Fork or go into the community and see what the median price has done in that neighborhood. That's how I would approach it anyway.
Yeah.
And kind of do a sanity check and say, is this same unit really worth $50,000 more today than it was when they bought it in April of 2022 at the height of the market?
Yeah. So remember this, and you bring up such a good point, Haley. In order for data to be significant, you have to have a big enough pool of data. Otherwise, you get swayed really quickly and it becomes less and less meaningful, right? That's why you have to have a certain number of participants in any study for it to have validity, right? And it's true of data points in real estate. So if we want to get super macro, like a certain subdivision, hard to give meaningful data. But if you can pull in data in surrounding communities, so for instance, Spanish Fork, well, throw in Springville, Mapleton, and Salem, right? And if you're talking townhomes and condos, then select townhomes, condos, and throw out single family. But my point is, the beauty of this home sales graph is I can come in here and modify the search, just like you were saying, right? So I can come down here and say, yep, I want Utah County and I want Spanish Fork, which I think is 518. Hey, look at that. And let's throw in 511, which is Mapleton, and 519, which is Springville. And I'm just going to do this real fast and just, oh, I should have done townhomes. But you get a little more specific data, right? There's fewer and fewer points, right? There's only 404 listings versus thousands.
Mm-hmm.
And if I were to pare it down by townhomes and condos, I would get even less data, but at least it kind of ballparks me.
But clearly the market has come down
Oh, yeah.
since that that time.
Yeah,
So
now
to make
remember,
it
the blue line is not number of solds, it is sales price. Black
Yeah.
line is the number of sales.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
okay, so my
Good.
point is, get in here and screw around with these things and figure out what they can do for you, okay? All right, so there's that, blah, blah, blah. All right, so I'm gonna show you how I get to these. So if you come to the statistics tab and you go to just market analysis, that's gonna bring up this data. It's pre-canned. You don't have to do anything. It's awesome, right? If you're just so afraid of stats and data, this is like simple stuff. So if you look at this one, this is just the number of listings entered. And
Hey, Matt,
yeah,
sorry, where are they pulling this data from? Because before, weren't they pulling all this stuff from Showing Time?
no,
Oh,
This is
okay.
data pulled
All right.
directly out of the MLS.
Interesting.
Yeah, and what I love about this one is just the color coding and the sliding legend that goes with you. 2020 was kind of a high watermark year for pricing, right? Because of COVID and everything else. But guess what? It wasn't great for inventory because a lot of stuff never even hit the market. It was sold before it even hit the market. So if we look at 2022, which was kind of our first transition year, that kind of becomes our most recent watermark for the number of listings, right? So this yellow line. And then if we look at the current 2024 blue line, you can see we're trailing underneath it. Not a big deal. But again, you can do this with active listings. Kind of cool data right there, right? What were listings do in 2023 versus 2024? Great data, super simple data, didn't have to do anything to craft it. And I get it, it's MLS wide, but I can show a seller, listen, you got more competition, right? The listings are going up versus where they were last year, right? To the tune of about 1,300 more homes statewide, okay? You get the idea. I'm not going to go through all these days per month and all, under contract residential listings per day. How many are going under market this year versus last year? And it's just super easy, cool data. And like I started off with, find the 2 or 3 data sources that resonate with you and make sure you're hitting them monthly and processing them and digesting them and having a little dialogue for when somebody asks you that golden question. Good time to buy, good time to sell, how's the market, what's going on, blah, blah, blah. All right, moving on. This is absorption report. And I say this to people in sales meetings and I kind of get people going, oh, it's so confusing. I'm here to tell you today, you're going to find out how easy this is. Okay. Absorption report simply says, if I have 10,000 homes on the market and I'm gobbling up 5,000 per month by way of sales, how many months of inventory do I have? 2. It's not hard. But what people see this table and this matrix and they get all confused. Let me start right over here. And like I said, the good news is this is recorded. So if you don't remember it, you're going to be able to come back and see this. Do not put the calculation method as actives plus under contracts as your inventory. What do you think the percentage of under contracts is that close right now? 80%, 90%? Yeah, so they act more like solds. So treat them as solds. And let me show you how big of a difference this makes. And just so you know, the 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, that's just how much data is going to be used in the calculation. The more months you have, the more accurate the data tends to become, because if you had a strong March, it's going to skew the numbers in the past 2 months. But if you average it across all the way back to, say, September or October, then it's kind of hard to sway the data. So right now, based on 2 months worth of data, we have 1.6 months of inventory. Everybody sees this, right? Okay. What happens if I change the under contracts to be part of the actives? Watch that bottom line. Really? 4.53 months of inventory? No, we don't. That's a crappy way to do your data. This is way, way, way more accurate, right? And if you need the visual, the blue line is...
So, Matt, why have active even in there?
They have, well, it's not the actives that you're worrying about, it's the under contracts. How
Got
do we
it.
treat the under contracts? You can't just dismiss them. They're something. They're part of the data set. So you have
Got
to
it.
make a fundamental decision. Are they more like solds or are they more like actives? And I'm here to tell you, they're more like solds. So use the second option. It's statistically way more accurate. So the cool thing is, if you just use 2 months worth of data, it's like, oh, look, there's 1.5 months of data, or sorry, 1.5 months of inventory. But if I go back 4 months, right, to kind of use more accurate metrics, it's like, well, it's not huge, but we gained a half month's worth of inventory, right? And even if I go back 12 months, you can see it gets rid of all the outliers.
Matt, this is James. It adds the number of months is an accuracy issue, but it's also a trend issue.
For
So
sure.
if you look at that trend of 2.6 months over 12 months, it simply shows that it's that inventory is getting worse, right? Is that we're down. So I think the trend's important to show what's happening in the overall market.
For sure. And let me share this with you. If I were to look at, okay, what has the last 6 months been? Right, that goes back to November. So you have November, December, January, and February in your data set, right? Those aren't exactly your most stellar months. Right, and I can argue a couple of ways on that. I can say, well, inventory grows, or I could say, and I'd have to back it up with another data source, but quite often our inventory level drops off during those 4 months. So again, it's about getting us in the ballpark and in the right field in the ballpark, right? I won't be able to tell you exactly where the hit's going, but I know it's going to left field, or I know it's going to center field, or whatever the case may be. We get as close as we can, but it's far from 100% predictive. But I'd much rather have that data, knowing where I need to place my players, than having no data. Okay. All right. So that one is the absorption report. Super easy. Run that one. I would strongly suggest you run that one each month, because to your question, Haley, in our phone call, it's like, how do we use this data? I mean, it's one thing to have it, but how do you use it? And it'd be like, if somebody came to me and asked one of those golden questions, hey, Matt, how's the market doing? And my first question would be like, well, to Dan's point, it kind of depends. Are you talking about as a buyer or seller? And I'm always going to kind of ask that question, so I know how to gear my response. And if they say a seller, it's like, well, listen, the most recent data says we only have between 1.5 and 2 months worth of inventory. A balanced market is somewhere between 3 and 5. Above 5 is definitely a buyer's market, right?
So Matt, do you always use kind of the broadest pool of data? I mean, should we be doing it to our markets? Kind of say, if we're mostly in Utah County, or if we're mostly in Davis County, should we be using that more? Or should we use the whole pool?
Well,
how different is it, I guess, is a question. Like, if
it's
you
a
throw
super great question. And I think the way people learn is by doing a compare and contrast. So I almost always will go big first, whether that's county level data, and then I'm going to boil it down to Spanish Fork to do the compare and contrast. So it gives them a sense of context, right? Because if they can see statewide, countywide, whatever the case, here's the number, but in my county, the data has varied this much. Well, there's something going on in my county that you and I need to talk about. And that's why I'm the expert. I'm here to guide you the differences and the nuances in our specific market in Spanish Fork, right? That's my general approach. When you can see the perspective, when anybody can, whatever we're talking about, when you can see the perspective and the delta, the change between the two, we're all pretty intuitive, and we can kind of, it helps us digest and process the meaning of the information. So that's why I do it that way. Okay. All right.
Matt?
Yes, Don.
Hey, before you move off of this graph, explain to me again why you're using 12 months instead of 2 or 4 or 6 months, because to me it seems like it would be just the opposite. You'd want the most current months.
So it's a great point, Don. Kind of what I was just saying to Haley. If I want to go macro first, I'm going to be like, if I was talking to you, Don, I'm like, listen, you know what? When we talk about absorption rate, the bigger the data pool kind of helps us digest or get our head wrapped around it. If I was to use the last 12 months worth of data, right, it would say that we have 2.6 months of inventory. But Don, here's what I want you to see, and some of this is to James' point. The most recent data is that, and it gets a little bit iffy because you only have 2 months worth of data, but it's saying we're trending more like 1.5, right? And so I'm not going to say I love either one more. Right? I'm gonna show you this so you get your perspective, and then based on your needs as a buyer or seller, I'm going to show you the 2 months or the 3 months worth of data and be like, can you see the difference, Don? This is why it's important for us, right? If you want to buy now, there's not a ton of inventory. It's less than it was 12, with 12 months worth of data. So we really ought to get you to our lender. We need to get on a hair trigger when we find the right property. I've already explained to you the contracts and why it's so important that we go through it now. So when I say, Don, we've got this sweet property, let's pull the trigger on it. You know you have your due diligence. You know you have your financing and appraisal deadlines to protect you, so we don't have to have that debate, and meanwhile the property has gone away. This is how data helps us get people to move, and for their benefit, right? And I think being able to show them the perspective, the delta between those two data points is terribly helpful. Make
Matt,
So that data means there are either more buyers in the market, fewer listings in the market.
Or both. Yeah, or both.
Yeah.
Yeah, James, go ahead.
Just as an old finance professor, I would suggest if you're going to use statistics and you're going to use this, get deep in it, and it's not something you're going to know. You're not going to know the market area the first time you run it. You're going to have to look at different market areas, because I can promise you that Holiday and West Valley don't have the same trends. And so you're not going to be able to go in and do this in 3 minutes and have the answer. You're going to, I mean, I will tell you, when I'm looking at a specific market area, I'm going to spend a couple of hours looking at the statistics in various ways with different categories of properties, using all of this. And you can do that. You can modify your search in a million ways, and the statistics can either confuse you or provide you with a very concise story to show your client.
Here's my promise to you. Great point, James. And I would say state level data, county level data, and then your micro level data. If you do those things on a regular basis, like once a month, then it's not going to take you so long to spin up in a specific situation, because you've already got a good chunk of the background data, and you can know how this specific local data parses with the stuff you've already done each month, right? And it's not that you become some nerd. I'm just telling you, this is not that hard to get a good baseline of data. Okay. So I got to move along or we're not going to finish. This is, if you go to statistics and you go to the market summary report. Is this the right one? Yes. No. Home sales graph. No. Scratch everything I just said. It's the market summary report, because it says so right there. This one is a quick and dirty. I deselected all these middle ones because, frankly, I don't want to know about them, because they're not terribly meaningful for me in a general sense. But knowing the active listings and the sold listings and how they break down via price point, this is kind of cool. This is like super fast data. There's a great summary on the top. We're talking about 1,145 listings. The low is this, the high is this, there's the median, and the days on market. But here's the cool thing. If you have somebody that has a condo up in Lehigh that's going to go for 420, I'm like, well, you know what? Right now, as it stands, here's how many are currently active. Right? I have this in Utah County, by the way. It's not statewide. You can see it up in the yellow. And so, okay, you got 27. If they bump up or they're a little more expensive, wow, the competition just tripled. Right? So you can see kind of the bell curve in the numbers, right? The sweet spot of sales is between that 450 and 700,000. I know that's a little bit of a big gap, but it's not that big of a gap. But that's where the majority are. But here's kind of something cool. As you go down, where was I? Let's see. So for instance, I have a listing at 1245. and I've got 13 competitors in the entire county, right? But if we drop down on price, we double that number. Again, this isn't like huge data, but it's nice for you to be able to, like salt and pepper, season your presentation with your client just to show them that you're tracking data and you know how much, and you're sharing with them how much competition is currently in that price point. If I want to go and modify the search, I can go change this and say, well, I just want to know Spanish Fork or Springville or a few cities. Okay. Helpful.
Hey, Mac,
Yeah, go ahead, Don.
hey, just to back you up, that's probably the report I use more than any other report in the whole system, and I think sellers really like it.
And why? Why would you say they like it so much?
Well, it just shows their competition in black and white. They can't really argue with it.
Yeah. So here's an interesting thing too. Remember, I only selected the actives and the solds. I can go to that. Let's use the sweet spot. You know, the 450 to 499. There's 89 active, and I go down to the solds, and that 450. These are the number that were sold in the last year. Wow, that's a huge number, right? And you can see once you start dropping out of that bell curve, right? So I'm talking all this data, you get up into the 900 to 1,000,000, your numbers drop off dramatically. That is a good piece of data if you're selling in that higher end, right? Be like, guys, there's only so many buyers. The numbers don't lie. Here's where the majority of your buyers are. You're trying to sell here, right? So it's got to look crisp. It's got to be compelling. You got to get your pricing right. We've got to get financing options, right? I can go through a list of things that I want to talk to them about, and it's all backed up by data, which makes it a little more compelling rather than me just being a talking head in their kitchen saying, this is what we need to do, right? Good. Thank you, Don. All right. So this is one of my favorites, honestly, because it's super easy and quick and dirty data that helps us, right? It is if you go to statistics, it is the daily snapshot report. Okay. And you obviously it's keyed on today, and it says, okay, you know what? I've got to update my date because I was playing around with this. Update report. Okay. So on this day a year ago, we had 6,600 listings. Today we have 7,800. It went up 18% year over year. Same thing with backups and under contracts. And it's just super cool, fast data. But let me show you something else that you can do with this. Notice over here, you have the date, meaning a point in time, or a date range. And to save time, I'm going to show you the reports I ran on this. Oh. So you can see I did from January 1st, 2024 to April of 22nd of 2024. And how does that time frame compare to a year ago, that same time frame? So the previous year is the black line. So here's how many actives there were last year through this date and time in this year, and how we're trending this year. That is super fast, easy data. And it makes sense to people, not very hard for them to see, to say to them, hey, can you see we're dealing with more competition right now? Or if you're a buyer, hey, can you see why we have more things to choose from right now? Just super easy, cool data. All right, and here's one on the actual under contracts, right? Here's the current year. Here was last year. We're rapidly catching up to how many we were putting under contract last year, and we'll probably bypass it significantly as soon as rates come out in the positive at all. Okay. All right. How much time do I have? Okay, 8 minutes. Whoo! I got to move. Okay. Now, those were all just the appetizers. I'm kidding, but kind of not. If you go to the statistics and you see this very top one, rapid stats, this is something that was added a year ago, and you can lose your mind in here in a good way. All I'm showing you right now is the dashboard. It's the first thing you come up to when you click that button. And even if you stayed only on the dashboard, it's going to be helpful, very helpful in your statistical analysis. So the three main categories that they track on your dashboard is how many actives, how many solds, how many under contracts. And notice they default to today, well, except for the solds, because they have to have some level of data. And so it defaults to 30 days out. But I can really quickly come in here and say, okay, so the listing count is 8,000 today. How does it compare versus 30 days ago? Oh, we've gone up 7% in the last 30 days. Oh, what about in the last 60 days? Oh, we're up almost 12%. How hard is that? That is so easy. And if I was going into a listing presentation, and oh, by the way, you can come in and customize this, right? To more specific data, and I'll show you that in a minute. Same thing with solds, same thing with under contracts. You know, if I were to go and say, okay, 60 days ago, 60 days ago, and the last 60 days, there's my data. So listings are up, right? Almost 12%. The solds have increased 39%, and the under contracts have gone up 19%, right, in the last 60 days versus the previous period. I don't know how to make it any easier. This is like super easy access.
Does it have year over year?
We can, yes. Actually, if you went to, there you go, 365 days. We're up 19.65% versus a year ago.
How about the other two? Just curiosity.
Yeah, they all have it. I mean, seriously, how easy is that, you guys? You pay MLS dues, and this is some of the most beneficial things that your dollars get you, and very few people use it. So again, I'm going to beat the horse one more time. If you set up monthly to...
Is that statewide or is that county or what's...
This is all UtahRealEstate.com, so about 94% of the state. And
Okay.
and in your neck of the woods, we get about 50% overlap from dual subscriptions, Kyle.
Okay.
Now, notice I didn't change anything here on the left. If I scroll down, I covered this, I think 2 sales meetings ago. This one's super easy if you understand what it says. Red is simply how fast are we absorbing properties, right? Months of inventory. And then the blue is the months of supply. So you can see the crossover came in June of 2022, right? We were just, we had about as much demand as we had supply in a month. We would gobble up what we had, right? And that was the pivot point. After that point, we have more inventory, or sorry, more supply than we actually have demand. Super easy to see. That's not hard, right? And if you can put that in front of people, you know, can you spin this either way for buyers or sellers? Dan, I want you to take a stab at it. I'm your buyer. What does this data mean for me?
As a buyer, well, that means that homes are likely going to sit a little bit longer. And so this is, even though, you know, air quotes, months of supply means that this is not technically a buyer's market, that the absorption is a little bit slower than it's been previously. And so then therefore we can put a little bit of pressure on the seller and ask for concessions and price reductions and things like that.
Simply put, good job. The last these most recent 2 years are significantly different than the 2 years before it, right? Years before, you were competing with 8 to 10 other, maybe even more offers on the same house. The luxury you have now is you actually have a little more control. There's a little more leverage. We can get sometimes some closing costs, depends on the specific home and how desirable it is, and if we are competing with anybody. But as a general rule, we can negotiate some things in your favor. Isn't that great to hear, Mr. Buyer? Right? There's even more to choose from. I mean, if you just look at the blue line, there's more to choose from than has been in the 2 years previous. So again, this is all just coming up by clicking on your dashboard. I didn't do anything, no configuration, nothing. All this data is right here for you, okay? What I'm gonna do is just jump to this last one. This is super hard, so please pay attention. It's 2 clicks. So when you're on your dashboard, if you come down to market summary, right, and it's going to bring up all these tiles, and you can play around with them. And and none of these are too complex, but if I'm specifically looking to give something to a client to just show them that I pay attention to the data and that is digestible with very easy upfront digestible chunks for them, I'm probably going to choose this one. Okay. The residential market stat infographic. And look at this piece that comes up. I mean, this is ready to print, can hand out, leave behind. I can send it out as part of my monthly newsletter. I mean, there's so many things I could do with this, and it was 2 clicks. Now, if I want, Haley, I know I can read your mind, but Matt, what about specific, areas? I can refine this to Utah County, deselect all, go down to Utah County and say, just show me Utah County, refresh the report. And now I have Utah County data, right? And if I want
Matt, this is so easy to grab a screenshot of and include in your Core Presents listing packages, and you can update it every couple weeks.
So easy. And oh, by the way, did you see that you can include a cover page and you can include a report definition here? And oh, by the way, I can download this as a PDF. There's so many. This is so freaking easy. It drives me crazy that we are not utilizing the very tool that we pay for monthly that would make us like stand out, at least from the data standpoint. Okay. So yeah, pretty cool. Look at what it says though. Let's just read the market commentary up front. Active listings are up 12.6% and sold listings are down 23.3% compared to this time last year. With the increase of months of supply, the market in this area is showing signs of moving towards a buyer's market. It's not saying it is a buyer's market, but it's moving towards that, right? And here's the data to back it up. Well, we're up 12.2% on listings. Solds are down 23%. And again, this is 12 months worth of data. The median sell price per square foot, which I hate that one, by the way, but that's okay, is down not much. It's pretty stagnant, which kind of is reflected by our sales price, right? Flatlining. Months of supply is up 46.1%, and median days on the market is up 6.7%. Yeah, great data for a buyer. Even better data to put in front of a seller and be like, you really want to move? Then we better get after it. What, 2 clicks? 2 clicks, guys. Super, super, super easy. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. I put on here that our next contracts and negotiations, I'm going to take, I want you guys to go play with this over the next 2 weeks. Get familiar, like I said, choose your 2 or 3. Don't do all of these, it'll drive you crazy, but find the ones that are going to get you the most bang for the buck with your SOI, your clients that you work with, and set, please, 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 I'm pleading with you, please create a calendar event so that you don't, we all have good intentions, but unless you do something about it and actually put that calendar item on your calendar to remind you the 1st of the month, the 5th of the month, whatever the case may be, that you're committed to spending an hour and a half to 2 hours going through this and being able to speak to it just modestly, intelligently, and you are going to be so far ahead in so many different conversations. And yet this is the one area that realtors just flat out disregard on a massive basis. So if you do this, you really are setting yourselves apart. And what we're going to do in the next contract and negotiations class is I'm going to take some of this data and show you how to leverage it in doing a CMA. Dan does a great CMA class through KV Core. And Dan, is it fair to say that a lot of times you take the dirty CMA product on the MLS to just kind of find the right properties and then sometimes plug that into KV Core? Is that fair?
It is fair. And let me give an update on that. A year ago or so, KV Core sometimes would not include MLS numbers, and you'd get this random, comp that you want to include and whatever. The last 3 or 4 that I have done, KV Core has done is grabbing those. So I'm doing that less and feel more confident that KV Core is getting those MLS numbers.
Yeah. So whether it's KV Core, Cloud CMA, or Core Presents, Cloud CMA, Those are all beautiful programs, and they're designed to put it in a very digestible format for our clients. But I would say the workhorse behind that, maybe I'm just old school, it's possible, is using the MLS's CMA product coupled with statistics and data to get good comps to then port over to the pretty interfaces of Cloud CMA and even better Core Presents. And so this is kind of a stair stepping. I want you to get comfortable. Here's how I know I'll be successful. You can be your own judge. As you do this for the next few weeks or the next months, and you have your calendar reminder and you do this, and it's a whole investment of an hour and a half, 2 hours. I just want you to track your own mentality when somebody comes and asks you the question. My experience is when agents get even modestly good at this, they're not fearful of somebody asking the question. They get like geeked up. It's like, oh my gosh, they just asked me the golden question. I am ready to go. Like you're like chomping at the bit, ready to help them understand people. And that's not just for like a novelty. It's because people want to know. It's what I started off with. If they're fearful and they're looking somebody to trust, you think they're going to trust somebody who's passionate about it, and the reason they're passionate about it is because they understand the data and the industry and what's going on in the market, and they can articulate that. Ooh, combine that with contract knowledge and demonstrating your ability to communicate and negotiate. Man, you just got all 4 legs of the stool, right? So I appreciate you being on the call. Look forward to our next call, which is going to be kind of the nuts and bolts application of this data in our CMAs, in our listing presentations, and in our buyer presentations. Okay. Thank you for being on the call today. Hope you have a great Monday.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt. That was
Thanks, Matt.
fantastic.
Thanks, Matt.
See you guys.
Tastical.